Season 5 Reloaded's update for Warzone brought with it some weapon tuning, so you know what that means. We're going to re-examine here the top 10 loadouts after update that you should be using within Warzone. As we go along, let me know your thoughts down below. Do you guys agree with this list? Are there some weapons you think should be in the top 10? What are your picks for the top 10 weapons within Warzone? Whatever it may be, feel free to let me know your thoughts down below. But hopefully enjoy the video. If you do, make sure to drop a like down below. Let's aim for 1,000 likes on this video. And of course, if you are new to the channel and want to stay today with all things Warzone, Vanguard, and anything COD related, with nearly 60% of viewers not subscribed, maybe consider hitting that subscribe button. I'd love to have you in the community. And finally, my friends over at G Fuel bumped up code Espresso to 30% off your entire order. So if you guys want to check anything out for the very first time, pick up a restock, whatever the case may be, now is as best a time as any. But that said, we got a lot to talk about, so let's jump right into it. So the update this past week on weapon tuning, when I think about the tuning and the meta changes here, I think of that meme from So You Want to Be a Pirate of the, well, yes, but actually no. As in, yes, there were changes made to quite a handful of weapons, but no, not a lot of what you're used to is being killed off the meta, and it's definitely still viable. There are some ones that I think squeak their way into the top 10 and kind of shake up maybe the power rankings in that top 10, but overall, you might still be familiar with some of the things you've seen here. None of these are in any particular order here going forward, but I do want to start out with what I feel are the great weapons of the top 10 here, so the sort of maybe top 5 of the top 10. Situationally, though, these can all deviate, and you'll see that as such, but starting out, I want to start with one that is an interesting re-addition here, I think, into the upper echelon of the weaponry, that being the Farah. This kind of shifted a bit to be a top contender again because there were changes to other weapons in the rifle category. This wasn't necessarily touched on the patch notes, but that's what makes it kind of climb the power rankings. You bring down these other weapons slightly, and by comparison, that gap is a little bit closer. The Farah, of course, was a huge meta weapon a couple of seasons ago here, but it's never really lost its place in the power rankings. It's just been kind of replaced by a couple of other weapons. But if you can deal with the ADS times, it's an absolute laser pointer, incredibly easy to control, and especially with some of these weapons that are still in the top 10, like the C58 and the Stoner having direct adjustments to their recoil and recoil patterns, having something that's a straight shooter is absolutely a pro. For this class setup, we've changed it slightly here a little bit. I've kind of dropped off with the Tiger Team Spotlight that we've normally run on it. So what I've been running recently is the GRU Suppressor, the Spetsnaz RPK Barrel, the 3x Optic, the 60-round mag, as well as the Spetsnaz Grip in place of that Tiger Team Spotlight, offering up just a little bit more control here so that you can end up having a laser pointer and even at a distance, gunning your enemies. Second weapon up on deck that I still think is absolutely a powerhouse here is that of the OTS-9. Now, unlike the Farah, it did get adjusted in the latest weapon tunings pass, in which it had its maximum damage range decreased by 6.2%, which on paper is actually a substantial change here, but we're going to be using this for close quarters. That's where the weapon really excels, and so therefore, while you might notice it at some longer range engagements that you might be forced to take with that weapon, whenever you're using it to play to the weapon's strengths, you won't be noticing it all that much, and as a result, it still absolutely shreds. It still shreds just almost as much as it did before the update here and before this adjustment. I'd still highly recommend this. I still think this is probably my favorite SMG to go to, and if you can get over that small limitation of only 40 rounds per mag, it's absolutely the best SMG in my opinion. Again, you just got to know when to take some of those engagements so that you don't run out of ammo too quickly. For this build, we end up running the Sound Suppressor, GRU Suppressor. We're not playing for this from mid to long range here, so Sound Suppressor getting that extra aim down sight speed and sprint to fire speed absolutely does the job while keeping us off the radar. The Task Force Barrel, the KGB Skeletal Stock, the Serpent Wrap for a little bit more ADS quickness, and then the 40-round mag. Now this you can interchange between the fast mag or the regular mag here, depending on what you want. Personally, I don't want to sacrifice as much here in terms of that ADS penalty for the speed mag, so I take the regular 40, but again, that's entirely up to you. Number 3 here, a weapon that was also changed, but I still think is in that top 5 category, is that of the C58. It had its recoil adjusted, but not necessarily so much in terms of the direct attribute where you'd think of where there's more kick added here to it or something like that, but they fundamentally changed the recoil pattern, which at a distance you'll definitely notice, but again, for mid-range, it's not terrible at all, and it's still incredibly easy to control if you learn that pattern and know how to pull down on your right thumbstick or mouse if you're playing on mouse and keyboard. But retain those properties of the AMAX 2.0 as we've called it here, and you have an absolute gunner of a weapon and something to take out your enemies with relative ease here. For this, it's still the same build we've used beforehand, the Agency Suppressor, the 18.7 Ranger Barrel. I kind of avoid the Task Force just because I think it's relatively easy to control the recoil as is. Plus, whenever you take into account those sprinting move speed and the aim down sight speed, those penalties, I want to avoid them, so I take the bullet velocity and vertical recoil control for the lesser penalty on that Ranger Barrel. But that might just be preference. You can absolutely use the Task Force if you'd like to. I take the 3x optic on it, the Field Agent foregrip for a little bit more control there once again, and the 55 round drum mag to finish off the weapon. Next, we end up having the Bullfrog, which is a weapon that has slowly but surely worked its way into some of my favorite weaponry to use within Warzone. Statistically, it doesn't beat out guns like the OTS-9, but in terms of sheer performance, ability to control, and mobility, it's one of the best here in this, and for that reason, I think it makes the top of the top 10. This weapon was untouched in the recent patch notes and the recent weapon tuning, but as with the Farah, it's kind of elevated by some of those other weapon changes, adjusting some of the other SMGs in the category. So if you want a weapon that can absolutely allow you to fly around the map, is incredibly easy to control, and especially in those close to mid-range engagements, this is the weapon for you. For this, I end up running the Sound Suppressor, the Task Force Barrel, the Tiger Team Spotlight back on this here for this one for the ability to get more movement speed and aim walking movement speed, the KGB Skeletal Stock, and then the Serpent Wrap as well for some ADS speed additions. Rounding out our first 5 of the top 10 here is a weapon that again was adjusted, that being the Stoner, having its recoil increased slightly, but I'm gonna be totally honest with you, man, unless you're playing for this at long range, it's a relatively negligible change. It's not something that at medium range or close range you'll notice too much, but dude, this thing is again a killer of a weapon. It was kind of working its way into the meta here before this adjustment, and being that the change is so negligible, I honestly think this still solidifies its place there. For this, I end up running the Agency Suppressor, Task Force Barrel, 3x optic, Serpent Grip for a little bit of that ADS speed, and then the Field Agent Grip as well. Normally, some people will maybe sacrifice that Serpent Wrap here and add in the Fast Mag. I think with the 100 round standard, it allows me to take enough gunfights that I don't have to reload right in a pinch situation. That probably will come back to bite me in the butt at some point, but for the time being, I like to use that attachment slot elsewhere. Now, before we jump into the second half here of this video, once again, if you guys are at all interested, my friends over at G Fuel ended up bumping up code Espresso to 30% off here for the Vanguard beta weekend and a sort of Season 5 Reloaded celebration as well. So if you guys want to pick up anything for the first time, catch a restock, whatever the case may be, links in the description below, and code Espresso get you 30% off your entire order. That said, the next weapon up on deck here is that of the Krig. Now, this was the weapon that on paper was adjusted the most. It had a change to the maximum damage range, it added a brand new mid damage value, it decreased the minimum damage, and also it adjusted the weapon kick. But the damages, those you can tell in some instances that there were changes, but it's still incredibly viable. I just maybe wouldn't say it's the #1 main go-to anymore. I definitely think that it's still in top 5 of those rifles here, but maybe not statistically speaking. Recoil though, that is still incredibly easy to manage, and truthfully, it kind of made it easier to control if you actually play around with it, or at least that's what it feels like to me. So for this, if you're still wanting to pick up a weapon that is incredibly easy to control and is something you could absolutely just beam players with, this again feels almost like the Kilo 2.0 to me still. This, I end up running the Agency Suppressor, the Ranger Barrel, the Tiger Team Spotlight, the 3x optic, and the 60 round mag as well. Now, of course, you can also change out that Tiger Team Spotlight. I'm just a sucker for better movement speed. You can change that out for the Field Agent Grip, which gives you even more control, so it can absolutely be even more of a laser pointer, but dude, this thing is still incredible, so definitely still give that a try if you want a weapon just to pick up and use. The MAC-10 is the next weapon up on deck here at this. This one, again, was untouched, but elevated by some of those other weapon changes here. It's still kind of an old reliable, if you will, in which it's incredibly easy to manage. It's got a decent damage profile, decent range. Handling and mobility is great on it, as always, and the recoil is almost non-existent with the right build. For this, we end up running the Sound Suppressor, the Task Force Barrel, Tiger Team Spotlight again for that added movement speed. I'm a sucker for that. The Raider Stock, and then the 53 round drum mag. We've talked about this one plenty of times. Again, kind of over-reliable here at this, but jumping over to the next weapon is one that honestly I haven't quite considered a sort of meta weapon, but is making its way up there. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of it here, but statistically speaking, it does basically everything the Krig does, and pretty much to a T, so I'd be kind of remiss to not introduce this here, but that being the QBZ. For this, we end up running the Agency Suppressor, Task Force Barrel, Axial Arms 3x optic, 60 round drum mag, and also the Field Agent foregrip for a little bit more control on that recoil. Again, this one might not be your cup of tea. It's not necessarily mine, but it is one that is getting up there. We'll see if there's any adjustments here that that make this even more viable in the coming future for Warzone going into maybe say season 6. But right now it's up there, but I'd probably put it at the tail end here of the top 10. And then moving on, we have the PPSH. This ended up having its weapon kick adjusted as well as ADS sway adjusted, though more so in a positive manner as described by Raven, and you can tell that you can more reliably hit shots as is described was their intended change here for this, to make that the target goal for this change with the PPSH. The PPSH has kind of always been teetering in and out of the top 10 if you ask me. Again, there's probably about 15 to 20 weapons that you can absolutely use, but just how viable they are in all situations is what's dependent on the sort of meta. The PPSH, though, I think is kind of clawing its way back in here with that, and for this, I'd absolutely recommend giving this a try. For it, we normally run the Sound Suppressor, Task Force Barrel, Tiger Team Spotlight, Spetsnaz PKM Stock, and the 71-round Drum Mag. That's honestly been one of my favorites to pick up as of recently, so definitely try that one out. But the final weapon we'll close on is, again, as always, the sniper that we love to close on, that being the Swiss K31. I still think this takes the cake, even with some of the adjustments here that was made recently, though negligible changes, again, to it. I just think it's so fun to snipe around here at this. Personally, I know this might be a little bit controversial of the sort of suppressor take. I run the sound moderator over the GRU suppressor. You have a lessened penalty to the ADS time, and I feel like it's still incredibly easy to hit those long distance shots, even without that little bit of an increase to the bullet velocity and effective damage range that the GRU suppressor offers. We also run the Combat Recon Barrel, the 5 milliwatt laser sight, the 7-round mag, as well as the Jungle Grip here to give us some better ADS speed. Now, that's the top 10 here, I think, of what is the sort of main meta and viable options. But once again, as we just mentioned, there's probably about like 15 to 20 weapons that can absolutely get the job done, but it's just hard to kind of make a top 10 out of that. I think that there are absolutely some close calls here at this. I think the MP5 from Modern Warfare is still up there. Just had some adjustments that puts it just on the outside looking in. The DMR as a secondary is something that's been an interesting conversation here and topic of discussion, with a titanium barrel increasing that fire rate. If you hit one headshot, you can absolutely kill an incredibly fast pace, but it's just not the most comfortable weapon, I think, here. That takes a little bit more getting used to. So therefore, I think it's, again, on the outside looking in. The EM2 is still great, but again, too much kick, I think, to rank it higher compared to the others, especially with like the C58 in there. But there's a lot of options still, but I think that's where I'm going to wrap it up with the top 10. So that's what we're going to call it. I would love to get your thoughts and feedback down there in the comment section down below. What do you guys think of this here? Are you guys liking this list for the top 10? Would you replace some weapons, change some weapons, add something in that we didn't even talk about? Feel free to let me know your thoughts down below. But hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to drop a like down below. And of course, if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single thing regarding all things Warzone, Vanguard, and anything COD related. We got so much stuff here coming up on the channel. So if you want to stick around, hit that subscribe button. If you also want to follow me over on Twitter and Instagram, those are the best places to get carrying outside of YouTube. Correct, live on both those. So if you guys want to strike up a conversation, ask me a question, whatever the case may be, that link is down there in the description below. That said, thanks so much for watching. My name has been Espresso. I'll see you guys later. Take care and peace.